There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. Welcome to The Bleeders, a podcast and support group about book writing and publishing. I'm writer and podcaster Courtney Kosak, and each week I'll bring you new conversations with authors, agents, and publishers about how to write and sell books. Hey Bleeders, I am hard at work on my revision for my debut memoir, Girl Gone Wild, which will be out in November 2026. I am just trying to leave it all on the page. I am totally blinders on, focused on the rewrite. I want to make sure I don't have any regrets. And because of that, I am bringing you something a little bit different today. Over on my other podcast, Private Parts Unknown, I sometimes have authors that I really admire who are writing about things like motherhood or sex work or polyamory or whatever the case might be come on the podcast. And it's not necessarily all writing centric. Occasionally it veers that direction, but we are usually talking about their books. So today I'm going to share a conversation with Margo Steines. She's the author of Brutalities, a Love Story, which is such a fucking good book. If you have not read it, definitely check it out. I'm actually planning to go back and give it another close read because I would love to interview Margo for this podcast. But we spoke a while back for Private Parts Unknown. She talks a little bit about her next project in the conversation. She's just so cool. She gave me the best words of wisdom about being a flawed mother. It was just a really good conversation, one of my all-time faves. So I'm dropping it on this feed today. I know you're going to love it. And if you're hungry for more, go on over to the Private Parts Unknown feed. So look up Private Parts Unknown, hit follow or subscribe or whatever the button is. And then check out the archive because I have a conversation with Cameron Deason-Hammond that's so good. I have a convo with Hannah Sward. There's a ton in the archive, so just give it a peruse. And then I will be back next week with a regular episode of The Bleeders. So I'll see you again then.
You were listening to a Pleasure podcast. For more from our Sex Podcast Collective, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Welcome back to Private Parts Unknown, a podcast about love and sexuality around the world. I'm Courtney Kosak, and today, privates, we are getting brutal. That is right. I am talking to Margo Steines, author of Brutalities, a Love Story, which is such a freaking good book. I got the recommendation from another writer, Amanda Monty, who I took a workshop from, and it was such a good recommendation. I gobbled this book right up, and then I was like, shit, I gotta have Margo on the podcast. I feel like I have adjacent kind of issues as Margo. Not exact, but we grew up in the same era. We're about the same age, and we've definitely had the same kind of cultural influences on our bodies, on our sexualities, and it was really interesting to talk to her after reading the book, just because y'all at home probably haven't read the book yet, which I highly recommend picking it up. I want to read a little description. So here we go. Quarantined in a southwestern desert city in the midst of her high-risk pregnancy, Margo Steines felt her life narrow around her growing body, compelling her to reckon with the violence entangled in its history. She was a professional dominatrix in New York City, a homestead farmer in a brutal relationship, a welder on a high-rise building crew, and a mixed martial arts enthusiast. Each of her many lives brought a new perspective on how power and masculinity coalesce and how far she could push her body toward the brink. With unflinching candor, Steines searches for the roots of her erstwhile attraction to pain while charting the complicated triumph of gentleness and love. Oh, you guys, it's so good. You should definitely order that right now. There is a link in the episode notes. So go ahead and order Brutalities, a love story. I think you will very much enjoy it if you are a reader. And I wanted to bring Margo on the show because there are so many relevant topics that we could talk about on the podcast. And we did. We talked about her experience as a dominatrix. We talked a little bit about ED and the culture that we grew up in and how that affected how we felt about our bodies. We talked about her stint as a high-rise welder and an abusive relationship. And then we also talked about pregnancy, which I am thinking about maybe having a baby. I am also 40, so I don't know how much longer that's going to be possible, but I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking real hard. And so I definitely asked Margo about that too. But I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And here we go. Enjoy the interview.
Hi, I'm Margo Steines, and I am the author of Brutalities, a love story.
Some of the pain and compulsion in your book starts with ED, and same for me. Grew up in the 90s, and it was so much a part of the culture, and it's so different now. So I guess I would love to hear your perspective on that. Like, paint the picture of this culture that made us sick, and then how weird is it that, I feel like the body confidence era is awesome, but it's so foreign to my experience growing up.
Yeah, I don't know how old you are, but I was born in 1982. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to say, in my home, like my family of origin, my parents and specifically my mom was like very sane and normal about all of these things, which is interesting. But the broader culture, and like I grew up in Manhattan, it was like when I was like hospitalized for anorexia, that was like the time that I looked acceptable in Manhattan. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like people would tell me on the street that I looked great, and I was like, I had like a feeding tube inserted the next day. That was normal. Skinny was a compliment. Being like muscular or thick in any way. And like I will say, like, this is a white perspective, but it was also like
Mm-hmm.
very much part of the dominant culture. It was like Kate Moss was very in
Mm-hmm.
media everywhere, and that was like the aspirational body, and there was only one body that you were allowed to have, and it was that one. And as a young person, like you receive this shit like a sponge. It's not like someone sat me down and said something harmful to me. It's like it came from everywhere. And I at a young age realized how much power I had over my own body and that I could make it what I wanted, and I didn't have any sense of consequence about any of that. So I just wanted to do that. And then, it like metastasizes into a whole psychological disorder. But I think we can't blame it all on the culture, but I do think a lot of it.
Yeah, no, it was huge. It's like so bizarre now to see. Sometimes they'll bring back certain tabloid covers or whatever of like the times we thought Jessica Simpson was fat. And it's like, oh my God, no wonder.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember being like probably like 9 years old, and like my friend was on the diet that her mother had put her on.
Mm-hmm.
That shit was very normal. And it was like for her health, but it's like, was it, or was it to make her acceptable in a way that was legible to the dominant culture?
Yeah. Yeah. No. And we didn't see, I mean, like Lena Dunham, what a inspiration. Just like you can be a big woman and be successful. I feel like that wasn't even really a possibility at the time.
And she's like not even that big. That's like the other.
I know. I know.
Yeah. Just like I think like the range of bodies that we're allowed to see. And I think social media has actually, for all of its harms, been good for that, because you see people in their bodies, like, and in New York, growing up in New York, you see everyone out on the street. But, now I live in a car culture, and like you don't see people that much. And
Uh-huh.
seeing people like being fit at all sizes and all that, like that was not around.
Okay, so I have always wanted to be a dom. It is problematic that, you got recruited at 17, but I totally understand like the yes of it. If somebody would have tried to recruit me at 17, I would have also been like, yes. So tell us about that experience and Yeah, then I want to do a like then versus now.
Well, I mean, I think part of my problem was that I just like always felt a inflated sense of my own adulthood from like a pretty young age.
Mhm.
And, you know,
Mhm.
who knows why, a lot of reasons. But so it wasn't that I didn't know it was like a stupid and reckless thing to do. I was like, this is the choice I'm making, you know? And so I all of a sudden was like making a lot of money. You know, now I'm like looking back, I'm like, was it a lot of money? It was definitely not as much money as I should have been getting. But it was like a lot of cash, you know. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I can get an apartment. I can, you know, leave my parents' home where I am not, you know, sort of allowed to act in the ways that I want to act. And you know, for me, the work itself initially was secondary to like the money and the freedom.
Mhm.
And I still, you know, like you said, like I see the problematic and harmful parts of like how I entered the industry. But for me, sex work brought me a lot of freedom. And that doesn't mean
Mhm.
that it didn't also have harms, but there was a lot of freedom attached to it. And I got to live as I pleased. And, you know, big picture of my life, that was good for me because I got to flame out faster and like get myself together a little faster. But, you know, I met this man in the course of my work there who, you know, the man in the book, and then I sort of started getting into that world in my own life in a very confusing way. But initially, it was really just about like, you know, like I think if someone had recruited me to like, I don't know, be like a high end like booster, like I would have done that too. Like I just like,
Or like run drugs or something like, yeah, sure.
yeah, totally. Like what else? I'll put I'll eat some heroin. Like that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like the way that we talk about sex work has changed so much, probably from when you were doing, from when you started. So, yeah, what is your take on like sex work then versus now? Because, I have an OnlyFans. I never have to interact with my fans
Yeah,
on like a physical level.
yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of things have changed. I think the politicization of sex work and even that we use that language, like that is new in my lifetime. It was, you know, politicized inside small circles of advocacy, but you know, they were very niche, and no one that wasn't personally affected really gave a shit. It was not a cool thing to be doing when I was doing it.
Right.
Like in my little circle of like bartenders and drug addicts, it was a little cool, but like once you went, it was like, you know, all of the words that we use for sex workers, like all the pejorative words, those were just like descriptive words. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I, for whatever reason, like from fairly early on, I was like pretty open and out as a sex worker. And what that did was that it defined my communities as people who were like also involved in, you know, like marginal shit. And there were only so many spaces you could live in if you were doing that work and being open about it, right? And a lot of people that I worked with were closeted and worked in secret and all of that. And now it's like I think the barrier to entry has changed a lot because you don't need to like divest from having like a normal life. Like you can do online sex work and like have it as a side hustle. And unless you're like a
Mhm.
teacher, you know, it doesn't really have to affect your life in any other way. And you know, with technology, like you can do it anonymously in different ways, like da, da, da. And then also like with the advent of technology, there's so much terrifying stuff around like border control, the way that sex work is policed using AI and technology and like all of this. So like you know, it's gotten safer and more accepted. And also, you know, the cultural system has employed all these new technologies to also like make it dangerous in new ways. So I don't know if it's gotten like broadly safer. And I think it depends a lot on like your privilege and how you're working.
Totally. You talk a little bit in the book about, even being a dominatrix is like a privileged level of sex work. And I do have the same kind of feeling about, you talk about being out about sex work and like that is part of making it more acceptable. And so even though it is a privileged level of sex work, you are taking that position and being out about it. So hopefully it does make the harder levels, more
Yeah.
accepted as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, like, if as many people who can afford, whatever that means to you, to talk about it would do that, like, I do think that that would move the needle in a good direction for people who can't, for, reasons of various marginalization, talk about what they're doing. And, the work I did was, like, quasi-legal, where it wasn't
Mhm.
totally illegal, like, a lot of the stuff I actually did was, but the premise of my business wasn't, which is, like, not true for a lot of people, and, that changes the way you can be in public about it.
And even, like, the shift of the language, like you were talking about, like,
Yeah.
that's a part of it too. Yeah. So, at the same kind of time in the book, there's this toxic relationship, and I've had my own series of toxic relationships. How do you think about it now, as, like, a healthier adult? What would you tell your younger self, and, like, do you think that would've made a difference?
I mean, like, my full answer is, like, stay away from the bad man. But no, I mean, I don't know. I think it's one of the things that brings me a lot of peace is, like, the idea that, like, we can't go back and change little bits of our lives without changing everything, and, like, I like
Mhm,
what I have now where I'm at, and, my ex brought a lot of harm into my life, and also, like, he brought a lot of things that were good into it. It was a mixed bag. Do you know what I mean?
mhm.
And I also think, like, I would absolutely have dated someone else who was harmful, perhaps in, like, more treacherous ways if I had not dated him. I do sometimes wish that I had been able to extricate myself sooner because that my life didn't start until, like, he left me,
Mhm.
And I just wish I could have some more time sometimes, but, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah. So, the high-rise welding, oh my god, for me, the hard part would for sure be the fear of heights, but that was not your issue. Just tell us, yeah, like, what inspired you to go into this, and then a little bit about your experience doing it.
Well, so I had only ever been a sex worker and, like, a failed waitress, and my boyfriend, this guy, he was just really embarrassed of me and really unkind about he didn't like how I looked in public, not how I looked, but, like, how I presented. Like, he didn't like
Mhm.
introducing, like, his girlfriend, but in his words, like, the hooker. So I was like, I want him to take me seriously. I want him to be impressed with me. I want him to be proud of me. Like, total, toxic. Like, I projected him as a father figure, all of that shit. And he was a
Mhm.
steel contractor, very successful, and, like, did it his own way. Very talented, and I respected what he did a lot, but really it was just like I wanted him to think that I was acceptable. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that too. And I liked also the idea of being, like, the least likely person to do that work and be good at that
Mhm.
work. So I went and I did that, and I did it for 10 years. Um,
That's insane.
yeah. Yeah, now I'm like, "Ooh, that was really a choice." And, like, I loved being a welder, and, after I got trained and got good at it, it wasn't, about him anymore. There was a lot that I liked about it, but it was also, like, I was not using we all get embedded with, like, some skills in this life, and I was not using the ones that I have. I was, like, trying to force myself to have ones that I made, you know? And also just it is a demanding job in a way that, now that I work in this office in my jammies, I'm like, "Oh, this is a lot nicer in a lot of ways." And, maybe I wouldn't have appreciated this if I hadn't done that, but, you know, physical labor is a different kind of life.
Yeah, and it sounds like you were working with, like, exclusively men
Yeah.
the entire time, basically?
Yeah, like, here or there, I would have, like, 1 or 2 female colleagues, but it was like, I know all their names by heart, there were so few of them.
Uh-huh. So, tell us about the guys. A mixed bag?
Yeah, mixed bag. So I started working at this place that was oh my god, it is still, like, the coolest place I've ever been. They make the most beautiful bespoke metal work architectural metal work, and all the guys there went to Pat, which is, like, an art school in Brooklyn, and they were just, like, cool as shit. They were artisans before that was, like, a hipster thing, and we worked in the Navy
Mhm.
Yard before it was a hipster place. And I just fucking loved it, and they mentored me a lot, and one person in particular who I'm still close friends with, he really taught me how to weld and, helped me become employable. And Then I got a union book, which I had to take because it was like actually paid a living wage, which like I never thought I would be able to do without being naked in some way, And all of a sudden I was making like grown up money. But I was working on these big crews of, guys that like I came to find community with, but on first impression, like they're pretty intimidating. They're like the guys that are hooting at you from behind the scaffolding on the
Yeah.
street. Um, and I was like, hi, like I'm here. And some of them were very kind to me. A lot of them were not very pleased that I was there and expressed that in different ways. It was like generally a very uncomfortable work environment for me. It's like you walk into work and there's 3,000 men lined up on the street. Like, just that's a hard feeling. And I'm sensitive and very attuned to like what people are thinking about me. And that's a hard thing. And then like the work is like, oh, also, and then you have to go like walk out on the fucking steel and like you're 20 stories up, which was honestly the least of my concerns.
Oh.
I was so afraid of being embarrassed and of these men that I was like frivolous and in the way.
Oh my goodness. So intense. Okay, so there's so much other good stuff in the book. Everyone should read it. I want to talk to you about pregnancy in specific. I am considering, so I am asking everyone I know about their experience. So tell me about yours, like where you were at going into it and what you loved, what you hated, what you found surprising.
I wanted to be pregnant for a very long time. I had a combination of like infertility and not the right partner for a very long time.
Mhm.
And when I met my partner, almost right away, I was like, okay, like this is it's time. I really wanted to be with him. I loved being pregnant. I was pregnant during the pandemic. That made it very, very hard. No one of my friends and family even saw me the entire time. I remained devastated about
Oh.
that. But pregnancy itself, like, it really changed and revealed a lot about the way I lived with my own body. Because once it wasn't like just like an object of presentation of self, and once it was like something that someone else needed, I realized how differently I cared for it and how like even in, recovery from all the various things that I've recovered from, like I still had treated myself pretty brutally most of the time. So that was,
Uh-huh.
not always comfortable, but like definitely good information. And then it's just like it's so fucking wild. It's like something is growing inside of you and weird stuff. Like you get this line up your butt crack, like when the baby's about to come, just like it's so strange. It's like your body is a science experiment, and some of it is really rough and horrible, and some of it is like miraculous. And it's like every day a new thing, you know.
Was it triggery for the ED or you were just like, no, I'm a vessel. Like, I'm going to go with it?
Like a little bit. Like I remember when they were like, I didn't gain enough weight, and they were kind of like hounding me about that, and there was something about that that felt good, and I was like, that's not fucking normal. Um,
Yeah.
but no, it felt like I was briefly outside of like the system of standards for a human woman. Like I didn't have to be that anymore.
Uh-huh.
That was this other thing. And then like some of the changes I like I got big breasts for the first time in my life, and I was like, oh, I like.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know I would like these. I think afterwards is actually when it felt more like that, where I was like, oh, I'm just like just sloppy, used up sack of a person. Like that didn't feel good. And because it wasn't, I was no longer like, in service to the baby in the same way. It was just like, here I am with like the detritus of what I used to be. Yeah. So mixed bag.
Okay, so that is the terrifying part for me. Tell me about the identity shift, if you felt anything with that, or if it was all just totally welcome, and the like body stuff after.
I mean, I definitely didn't feel like I became like a mama in like the way that on the internet you're supposed to. Like I was like, I just still felt very messy and very self-involved, and I didn't have a like linen skirt.
Oh,
I
nice.
didn't want one, But I definitely softened, like just emotionally. Like I feel much more affected by, when I witness suffering, it affects me in a way that it never used to. And like like, I don't think I could watch Game of Thrones again, you know? I think it would just make me
Oh,
upset. And I used to be like, I could watch anything. It never gave me a feeling, you know? And then afterwards, I don't know. I had a pretty rough postpartum, so I don't think this is necessarily standard, but it was very difficult to like move into the space of like being a parent and then sort of recover, mostly because I didn't have any time because I had to go back to work immediately. My
uh-huh.
partner had to go back to work immediately. I was like, you know, doing emails with a laptop on my newborn's head, which was not my own personal failing. It's like a failing of this fucking culture. And when I
Yeah.
read about people in Europe who get to take 6 months off and like bond with the baby, I'm like, oh, that would have been different for sure. But
Uh-huh.
you know, we both have a small business, and my employer was not particularly humane, and that's how it went.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. So for the podcast, we went to Finland and it's so different over there. It's like they give you a package of a crib and like everything you need. And they have not just maternity leave, but paternity leave. You know, like the system's so different
Yeah,
and is so designed with the woman in mind. It
yeah,
made me really sad.
yeah. I wish I could have had a different experience, and then like a lot of the work for me has just been letting go of that because I didn't. I had it was like it was an unprecedented time.
Yeah, yeah. Do you like being a parent?
I do. Yeah, no, I'm super close with my kid, and think they're the best. I have no regrets, though life is very hard. And like I can hold those things in, you know, each hand at the same time. And I didn't have to change in a lot of the ways that I had feared or been warned about. Like I'm still myself, and I'm like petty and irreverent and all of the things that I've always been. And she and I just vibe, you know.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna leave it at that then. So this is for the writers in the house, but tell us how the book got published.
I have a fantastic agent, and he sold it. That process was like pretty much out of my hand. Like, well, not out of my hands, but like he handled it.
Was it a full or was it a book proposal?
No, it was a full. I was not like I was not willing, but like I had the whole manuscript, and the idea of owing somebody a book really stresses me out. Like I would rather,
Yeah.
and also it's like, I mean, I see the argument of like knowing how much money you're gonna get, but like I don't. I keep my book money. Like I don't live on that money. Do you know what I mean? Which is
Uh-huh.
partly a privilege and partly hustle. But I don't ever want to like be making creative decisions based on like what I will get paid for it, I guess. So he sold the full manuscript, and then I had a great editor at Norton, and it took a really long time. I did not know it would take this long. And not for any reason. It was just like everything takes a long time, every round of edits.
How long?
Um, I have lost track of time altogether. Like the book came out in October 23, and I think he sold it in like maybe like early 22, I think. That could be off
Oh,
by like a year. I don't know. But I had written it as my MFA thesis, and then I had a lot of like editing and building to do after that. So I did a lot of work on my own before the sale, and then it was kind of just like one step after the other once it was sold.
nice. Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
And what are you working on now?
I am working on a book about milk that started with the writing that I was trying to do when my baby was new, and I didn't really have any time or any brain power, and I was just like making little notes on my phone. And then there was a formula shortage. My child was breastfed, but like once you feed a baby, you become very attuned to the fact that any baby anywhere might not have food. And I just got
Uh-huh.
really interested also in these internet factions of moms, of like the breastfeeding moms versus the formula moms versus and it's just all it is such a weird toxic ecosystem, and I became very interested in it. And then I got interested in cows and trauma and the ways that we take babies away from moms to have milk. And so that's what the book's about.
Oh my God, yes. I was gonna ask you about breastfeeding, and then it sounds like I need to just have you back when that book comes
Yeah,
out.
well, I'll just say this. My child is like closing in on 4 years old and still nurses. So that's who I am.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh my
that's not who I
God.
thought I would be, but it's just I just decided I wanted to let her choose when she's done, and she hasn't been done yet.
Oh my God. Amazing. Well, I can't wait to read Milk. I loved Brutalities. And thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was so fun to talk to you.
That was epic. Thank you again to Margo. You are a treat, and I can't wait to have you back to talk about Milk. Oh my God, that sounds right up my alley. Just cannot wait to read. And thank you for tuning into this episode of Private Parts Unknown. Stay tuned right here because I have got another sexy episode coming your way next week. For the latest episodes, look down and make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast player now. If you are listening on Spotify, it's like a follow and like a bell button. On most platforms, it's like a follow or a subscribe. And to stay in touch between episodes, follow me at Courtney Kosak. That is KoCak on Instagram and Twitter. And follow the show at Private Parts Unknown on Instagram and at Private Parts Un on Twitter. And check out my other podcasts for more of my audio creations. I have The Bleeders about book writing and publishing, and Podcast Bestie, which is a best friend to podcasters trying to grow and monetize their shows. Shout out to Amy Rausch for the bomb-ass theme music. For more info about Amy and her music, check out amyrausch.com. That's Amy, RAASCH.com. This episode was mixed by my beloved audio guy, Michael Castaneda of Plastic Audio. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. Love you, privates.